that if Scripture was inspired, then God would have protected it from any textual variation. And I'm like, and exactly how would he do that? Because, as I've said many times, if you accept Ehrman's standard of a variant-free manuscript tradition, then God could not have given his word until 1949. And we all know why that is, right? Because what was invented in 1949? The photocopier. Now, those first photocopies might not have even qualified. But the photocopier was invented in 1949. And so if the standard is perfection of transcription, which no one until our century would have ever even thought of. You do realize that, right? I mean, transcriptional error of handwritten manuscripts was how human beings had all literature up until the printing press, and the printing press didn't get rid of it. When Gutenberg invented the press, at least in the West, the Chinese had it before we did, but when Gutenberg did that, it was a movable font. And so there were still errors. You've heard the adulterer's Bible, where the printer forgot the word not, and thou shalt not commit adultery. And it was printed that way. And the king was so embarrassed about it that he chucked the printer in jail for that. So it was, again, not until the modern period where you could have any expectation of an exact copy, and that being done by a photocopier. So nobody in human history could have understood this even understood the argument until the modern period. And so every century of church history has a discussion of the differences in the manuscripts. Well, at least starting with the second. We have very little in the first. So Justin Martyr argues with Trypho the Jew about the readings of the Greek Septuagint and about textual issues. And that continues throughout church history, every single century. So Ehrman's argument, I was astonished, because how exactly would that work? If a scribe is making a handwritten copy and he's about to make an error, does God just take over his hand, and instead of all of a sudden and he writes the right word instead of the wrong word? Or does he just burst into flames before he can make the error? I mean, how does this work? I have no earthly idea. And it was, for me, one of the clear illustrations of how Ehrman really has to come up with some amazing ways of thinking to excuse his apostasy, because that's what he did. He's an apostate. So, how then do you respond? And I'm